Hello and welcome to the 1871 podcast, and it's a change of schedule for this episode. So we were due to be speaking to Reading women's defender Lily Woodham, but that's been put back until next week. So what we're doing on this episode, we were going to do this anyway, but we've brought it forward, which I think is a good thing. We're having a look at some of the potential contenders, candidates for next Reading manager. And then on tomorrow's episode, we're joined by some Reading fans who will be giving their opinions on what needs to happen next for Reading and who they think should be the next Reading manager. And talking of which, Johnny, let's talk now about who we think could be the next Reading manager. But I'm going to start by asking you a question. What type of manager do you think Reading need?
At the minute, someone that's I think kind of established, knows those leagues, League One. I don't think we can do the random management roulette that we've done for the last few years. Just pick a name. It needs to be done properly with reasoning. Now we've got Mark Bowen there and Brian Kerry. You know, you would hope now that they've been there for a while, that they know what they're doing, know what they're looking for, identified certain targets, know what league we're in, know what budget we've got, all that kind of stuff, which will give them, a clear idea of who they want to go for, who's out there, and the best pick for the club in this situation.
Yeah, we're obviously talking about Reading specifically, but if you look at a club like Brighton, Roberto De Zerbi, as far as I know, no experience of managing in the UK previously, I don't think. But obviously doing a brilliant job. And I'm sure the Brighton fans, although it is probably difficult to lose Graham Potter, they're thinking, well, fair play to the club.
Yeah.
They're doing something right there, that's for sure. And then you look at Vincent Kompany, I think first management job, isn't it? Burnley.
Yeah. So second, he was overseas managing.
Okay. Where was it? Was it in Belgium?
Yeah. One of the teams over there. So he had one season, I think, with them. I could be wrong.
Yeah. So there's a couple of examples there, but do you think in Reading's specific case, following relegation to League One, what we need to do, what the manager is going to oversee in terms of transition? Do you think we need someone who's got experience of, managing in League One, managing in the Championship, someone like that, do you think?
I think someone with experience of building a team pretty much from scratch and, and involving a team, much like, previous managers at Reading, like Pardew and Coppell, that, and Brian to a lesser degree, that project that was over a few years where you build a team, and they got closer to the playoffs, and then, they had the momentum. At the minute, we've just got, it's just been, because of the embargoes, it's just been kind of who is available and just sticking them in and hoping it works. And that's what we had.
I know it was painful for a lot of Reading fans, and some Reading fans will think it's a disaster that we've got relegated, and I completely understand that. But I don't know about you, I kind of look at these sorts of things in a positive frame of mind if I can anyway. But I genuinely have a sense of anticipation and excitement. I know you've got some concerns, but the embargo's been lifted. We know that the owners put a lot of money in. We know that we've got Brian Carey. We don't know what's happening with the scouting, but we've got someone who's overseeing that. We've got Mark Bowen, director of football. So we've put a structure in place in the last, roughly a year.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen overnight. So this now is going to prompt us to do a rebuild. So I'm actually quite excited, because if you think of the last few seasons, we've struggled, apart from that season where Paunovic came in and we were top of the league, I think 7 or 8 wins in a row at the start of the season. And then we just timed it perfectly so we could finish top of the league outside the playoffs. in 7th. But it's been kind of, we've been, talking about relegation, haven't we? Mostly the last few seasons, apart from that season. So I think now we're going to be, if you think back to all your time as a Reading supporter, wins, going for promotion, challenging for playoffs, they've been the fun seasons. So I think, it's probably not, I don't think we can expect too much next season, but I think we've got a chance of actually turning things around and starting to win more games than we lose for a change.
Yeah, I'm going back to 1998 when I had more hair. I think that's where I feel like, and it is like that, to be honest. It's kind of an end of an era, kind of an end of a, and it's a start and again, very much.
Of a new chapter.
And it is exciting in the fact that it's a chance to repair some of the errors. And there's been a lot of them over the last year, especially, again, losing guys like Elise for stupidly cheap money, Richards for nothing, a lot of academy players left. It's been mistake after mistake, and that's resulted in relegation. So now the only way really is that we have to do different and a fresh start. And, this is why the manager choice is probably the biggest decision we've had for years. Because if we get this wrong now, we could be in trouble.
Yeah, and I think Reading needs somebody, like you say, first and foremost, who can oversee a rebuild, or, not just a rebuild of the team in terms of players, but a rebuild of the club almost, and a rebuild of the philosophy and the culture.
Yeah, and the identity. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, because if you think about the identity of Reading, it feels like we've lost that in recent seasons.
Yeah, definitely. It's just kind of it's just nothing now at the minute, and we need to find that again. We need to find lots of things again. Like you say, it's a way of playing. It's the Reading way, the new Reading way. Get the fans on board so the fans enjoy watching the football, which again, I don't think many fans have really enjoyed much of football this season, for sure. It's been pretty painful the last few seasons. That all part of the package, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think completely agree with you. Reading do need to make sure they choose the right manager, and I think they do. The manager is kind of almost the last piece of the jigsaw. So it's about, what's the plan?
Yeah.
What type of what do we want the team to look like? What type of manager do we want? Then who's available? Who can we afford? Who's the best fit, really? And I think, obviously, it goes without saying, we need to do that fairly quickly.
Yeah.
But it's more important to get it right than to do it quickly, I think. But it's a balance between the two. So do you think it needs to be done within the next couple of weeks, or, have the behind the scenes team, do you think, been working on a plan for a while? So
I'd say so. I'd say even a couple of plans. Plan one if they stayed up, plan two if we went down. Do you know what I mean? Like, so what can we recruit if they stayed in the Championship? What can we do with League One? Which path they're going to go down. Probably, sounding out possible managers that may be out of work, maybe, in work, that they go, okay, well, they're hopefully doing the homework they used to do at the club in the old days about people's mentality and, off the pitch, all that stuff that we need, the characters. And
there are a few new available managers, but that's because the team they've been managing has been relegated, that sort of thing. So possibly that wouldn't be the right fit, unless the club think, it's the right man for the particular job in hand. But look, let's talk about some of the contenders. We don't have any inside knowledge. We kind of we're going to sort of do our best to figure out who might be in contention. So we talk about some of the contenders that aren't actually on our top 5 contenders list. So we're going to do a countdown of what we think are 5 of the main contenders. Possibly, we don't know. and that is in terms of who we think might get the job. And along the way, Johnny, I think it'd be good for us to sort of choose our personal favourites and why we think they might be a good fit. But actually, our top 5 list, our top 5 countdown, is going to be our kind of guess at who we think Reading might be looking at and seriously considering. So that's what the top 5 list is. So, Johnny, have you got the same? Have you got like 5 in mind that you think?
Five that Reading would choose, and 5 that me and you would choose, and whether they match.
I got more than 10 altogether.
But like I think it's we already see some of the candidates that have been mentioned, and I'd be very surprised if they went too far off a different radar at the minute.
Well, having said that, I think there is a chance that what might happen is we'll go through our list of names, and then Reading will appoint someone that we've never heard of.
Yeah, absolutely. And someone we won't even mention. We think to do it.
I don't mean that flippantly. I don't mean that necessarily in a negative way, because, Roberto De Zerbi, Arsene Wenger, probably the best example of a manager, and look what he went on to achieve. So it doesn't always have to be someone that we've heard of. It might not be. It might be. It might be somebody with a lot of League One and Championship experience who we know very well. I think some managers we would be really surprised. So if I don't know, we don't know who's on each other's lists, but I'd be surprised if it's Neil Warnock, for example, or I don't know who's on your list, Johnny, but I doubt very much if we're looking at the likes of Steven Gerrard and Frank Lampard somehow.
God no,
maybe someone like John Terry. And I think actually, if you look, we're kind of getting into the list of possibles now. But I know Sol Campbell has been mentioned, but for me, he's not a contender just because obviously he's a name. Paul Ince is a well-known name, and up and there. So anyway, I think that is a possibility, though, that we'll go through this list and come up with our 5 contenders, and then something will happen out of the blue, and possibly we've not heard of that manager because he's been managing overseas, Europe or further afield. We don't know. So look, let's make a start. Let's have a look at some of the possible contenders. So what I'll do, Johnny, I'll go down my list of possibles that didn't make it onto my top 5, and then you do the same, and then we do the countdown, take it in turns to go down from 5 to 1. So look, I think it's possible that Reading are considering some of these, and we don't know, but I think at least 1 or 2 of these might be in the frame. So Mark Warburton, Paul Lambert, Michael Appleton, Danny Cowley, and Steve Cottrell. I think at least one of those, there's potential that they might be in contention for different reasons. One of them being that there's some available managers that have experience of managing in League One, in the Championship, etc. So also. We had David Artell on as a guest.
Yeah,
he's quite interesting. I can't see him getting the Reading job, but he basically, Crewe was his first job. He used to play for Crewe. He came in, he did a rebuild at Crewe.
Yeah,
won promotion from League 2 to League 1. Finished in the top half of League 1 with the smallest budget in League 1. And then was relegated last season. I think Crewe finished bottom of League 1 last season. Not sure, but he was relegated last season. And I really liked what he had to say when he was a guest. So David Artell, he spoke about the most important thing for Reading, he thinks, is that Reading should be deciding what type of manager they want first, and then drawing up a list of people that fit that mold. And he said he thinks that Reading need to take on someone that's going to oversee a rebuild at the club and get the culture and the philosophy right. One of the names, I have no idea if he's in contention, but if he is, I can see why he would be, is Scott Parker. I think I'm right in saying he won promotion with Fulham and Bournemouth. I think he took both into the Premier League, didn't he?
Yeah, we're wearing the same jacket.
Yeah, well, I'm sure he used to go over to Milan and get outfits. So not a fan of his outfits, I have to say. But one of the reasons that a lot of these managers are available is because they've, inverted commas, failed at their previous club. His last club was FC Bruges. That didn't go well. So do you judge someone on their latest job, or is it deeper than that? So I've just put Scott Parker on there. Carl Robinson's already been mentioned, former Oxford manager. Had some success with previous clubs in the lower leagues, Oxford, MK Dons as well. I think he was manager there. Obviously, all depends what happens at Leeds. If Leeds stay up, I can see him staying on as assistant there, or would he be tempted by, another chance to manage a club rather than be assistant? But I think if you keep Leeds up with Sam Allardyce and you've got a chance to be assistant manager in the Premier League, probably would go for that. But then are they still going to be there? Neil Warnock's available. I don't think he's going to be the next Reading manager, but let's see. I mean, if Leeds do go down, then Carl Robinson, you would think, might be becoming available again. The other one who's really interesting, so I think this one there is a possibility he could be next Reading manager. That's Richie Wellens. So he's won League Two twice with two clubs in recent years. He's also won the EFL trophy, and we're talking last few years. So if you win League Two twice with two different clubs, you've got something about you. So obviously that's League Two, but Leyton Orient now in League One. The other question mark is, would Richie Wellens, having just taken Leyton Orient up, would he want to then jump ship and manage another club in League One instead? Although you could argue that, Leyton Orient have come up from League Two. Reading have been in the Championship for several years. He might see that as a step up and a chance to... I think part of the appeal for managers, when they're looking at this as a potential next job, is that they do get a chance to do a rebuild. So they get to create that identity. It's going to be, to a certain extent, their team that they're creating. So that might appeal to somebody like Richie Wellens if Reading are, considering him. And we don't know. But look, I've got a few ex-players on my list. And my top five, probably since we agreed that we were going to do this episode, my top five and the order has changed many, many times. And that's because we don't know, we're just guessing. But former Reading players in the frame, and I'm not talking about these because they're former Reading players. I'm talking about them because of their credentials, and they kind of happen to be ex-Reading players. And I think that might help, because they've got an identity with the club. So here's an interesting one. I don't think we would see him as the next Reading manager. I don't think actually he'd be in the frame, but Keith Curl, as fantastic player.
Yeah.
Back in the late 80s for Reading, part of that Simon Cup winning team. I think was certainly the quickest centre-back Reading have ever seen. But as a manager, got a lot of experience in the lower leagues, a lot of experience in League Two, not a great deal of success. But part of the reason that he's on the list is that he's available, although probably not quite what Reading are looking for. One that I do think has got a chance is Graham Murty. So had experience, obviously, of managing Rangers. Currently, Sunderland under One's manager. I've seen a lot of sort of chatter on social media about bringing in Murty and then maybe Noel Hunt as assistant or something like that. That kind of makes sense a little bit. I don't know. As I say, we're guessing. The other one. So these are managers who are not on my list of top 5 candidates who I think Reading might seriously be considering. Is our co-host Dylan Kerr. In terms of a personal choice, I think he's a fantastic manager. He's got a great track record as a head coach in Africa and Asia. He's won 7 trophies since 2014. He's kept sides up from relegation in the South African Premier Division. He's got Marumo Gallants, who were bottom of the South African Premier Division in January. He's got them to the semi-finals of the CAF Confederation Cup, which is kind of an equivalent of the Europa League. But I think he's managed a couple of under-18s sides in England. Chesterfield and Burton, possibly, I can't remember. But he hasn't got experience of managing, a first team in the UK. And I think that's why he's not going to be in contention, right or wrong. Certainly if we're doing a top 5 of who I think should be in contention, he'd probably be on my list, because I think if you look at what he's done, 3 different countries, he's just been successful wherever he's gone. And I think that's because his starting point is to get to know the players and find out what makes them tick, and then do the football stuff second. So yes, he's clearly a very good coach. But he starts, but you look at what Neil Warnock did at Huddersfield, transformation. And that's the sort of thing he does. And what David Artell spoke to us about was one of the first things he would do, when he gets the next manager's job, whether that's Reading or somewhere else, he would get to know the players first and foremost before starting talking about football. So I don't think he's going to be in contention.
I think he'd be someone that, and not just talking about a manager, but I think it's a management structure. And someone at Reading, and a joke aside, but I can see Harry Redknapp's being mentioned now. Imagine Harry Redknapp and Dylan Kerr together as a management team. There'd be quite a lot of expletives in the change room. But on a serious note, Dylan, I actually think if they were looking at someone as an assistant manager, I think he'd be brilliant. Brilliant at Reading.
I agree.
Any club.
I agree. But in terms of our top 5 countdown of who we think Reading's next manager will be, 2 things about what you've just said there. I don't think he's going to be on that list. And I think...
no, I'm not saying that, Mark. I'm just saying...
what I'm saying, just talking about what you said there, Johnny, is that I think if somebody like Harry Redknapp comes in, then Dylan Kerr's probably got less of a chance of coming in as assistant. Do you know what I mean?
I was joking, mate. I was just joking about the 2 of them. But I was saying as an assistant, as a person, he'd be a good combination.
I agree with you, but I think the point I'm making, Johnny, is that I think whoever comes in as manager picks their own.
Oh no, it's just a debate, though. So.
Yeah. So no, I don't for 1 minute think there's any chance of us seeing Harry Redknapp and Dylan as assistant. No, I agree with that. But what my point is, I don't think Dylan Kerr's on the management list, and I don't think he's in contention for assistant manager as well, because I think whoever the manager is will bring their own stuff in. So I don't think he's in contention. That's kind of my point, really. So look, the next one, Phil Parkinson, experienced manager, has been, if we take Wrexham aside, has had some success. The one thing he has got is a lot of experience. Obviously, you look at what he's done with Wrexham, won the title. I think they got 111 points. You wonder how much of that is to do with the budget that they've got, because budget does that's sort of the main factor, really, isn't it? In determining a club's success. That's the facts of the matter. So he's a very experienced manager, obviously a Reading legend. I don't know whether he'd be interested in leaving Wrexham. I think he's at the start of a project there, and I think he'd be a very good choice, and I think he'd be someone that Reading would be interested in. But I think it's more about he's probably not going to leave Wrexham. Would you go along with that?
No, I don't think so. I don't think he's part of a project there. It's so something that's already in momentum that he's got there. He's on an upward spiral. I think coming to Reading would be a backward step for him in that sense.
And I did realise you were joking about Harry Redknapp and Dylan Kerr. I do agree that would be interesting. That would be a bit like Steve Coppell and Wally Downs all over again.
Yeah, it's like you do need a management partnership. I think that's been, and that's what we haven't had really. Something, you need somebody that knows those players. And again, it's just because of the mess of the club over the last few years.
Yeah, Pardew and Martin Allen. Alan Pardew, Allen.
Our most successful teams have had good management. Good management partnerships.
I agree with that.
So it's going to be interesting to see what they bring along.
Right. So here's the final one, who has, until about half an hour before we started recording, has been on my top 5. I think he's a contender. So I'll give the reasons why I think he's a contender, and then I'll give the reasons why I don't think it's going to happen. Is Noel Hunt. So I think there is a possibility that Reading are talking about, or have been talking about, Noel Hunt. I don't know, actually. It might sound a strange thing to say, but I don't know if relegation has actually affected his chances. In some ways, now that the club's in League One, perhaps that's more of an opportunity for someone like Noel Hunt. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I think the positives about Noel Hunt is he's positive, he's well liked, he's respected. He's made it clear with his comments about Lucas João, for example. He only wants players who are committed. So Reading needs somebody like that. But I just think his lack of experience, I'm not quite sure.
I think he said it himself, didn't he, on the podcast, that he'd see himself as a manager maybe 4 or 5 years' time. I think that's what he said, wasn't it? And I think he's part of the future of Reading, that structure that we need. And with the under-23s, I think whether they are now, that his role there is huge in bringing the next generation of players on. And I think that's what he's brilliantly. That's what his strong point is. And he's, him stepping in, he's not lost any of his reputation, I don't think, with fans. I think people still, have huge respect for him, know that he was on a hiding to nothing. And that's, if he goes back to where he, back to the under-23s, brilliant, because he's still part of the club. I don't think he's going to be, I don't think it's the role for him as a manager. Yeah, it's a big job, and I don't think, like you say, he's had experience to do that, and it's not fair on him. I think, to down the line, hopefully maybe, a few years where, he's kind of got more experience from what he's doing, we'll see it, but not at this point in the club. That's
and I think what we saw as Reading fans was that when he came in, there was a bit of an uplift in positivity that came from him. And I think up until the Andy Carroll red card, I think we had a chance of staying up, because we it's kind of almost irrelevant to say if we hadn't have got the deduction. But of course, a lot of people have pointed out that if we hadn't have got 6 points deducted, we would have stayed up. But then if Derby hadn't have got whatever it was, 21 points deducted last season, they would have stayed up, and I think Reading would have gone down, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
So that's kind of irrelevant. So I think the fact that he gave the team a bit of a lift is kind of what people were expecting. I don't think it's sort of done his credibility or reputation any damage at all. I agree with you. So those are some names who, you know, a few of those could be potential contenders. So what about you, Johnny? What names have you got that didn't make it onto your top 5?
Pretty much the ones that you've already spoken about, to be honest. The only other, where are we? The only other one I think that's been mentioned that, and I don't think of it, you know, is John O'Shea, another ex-Reading player. He's the Ireland under-21s now. And I really can't see him changing from that to running a club. You know, he's starting a new role there. And, you know, again, he hasn't had the management experience. Maybe down the line again, who knows, in the future. But that's, you know, not the right place and time for somebody like that to come in without the experience needed to do this, you know. And that's no disrespect to any of those people, but I think, you know, it's what we need at this very point as a club going forward, and it has to be the right fit, and that you know is vital. You know, you could pick another, like you said, you know, you do get managers that have had not the experience come in, have that effect, and, you know, are successful. But like, it's not easy to choose that, and I don't think we're in a position at the minute where we can afford to gamble and for it to go wrong. You know, that's
absolutely. So any other names that aren't in your top 5?
Jesus,
have a shot.
I think anyone, you know, and anyone that's managed at that level has a chance of a job like Reading's. It's a big, you know, a big club in League One. So if you're a manager, somebody like David, you know, we've spoken to, you'd want the job. If you were, you know, if you've been managing League One, League Two level, you want a job like Reading's.
Well,
he
said he would do. He said he would. He didn't go as far to say as, you know, yes, I definitely want the job. He said he would certainly be interested enough. And he made a really good point. It's got to be the right fit for him, because you do hear stories about clubs that are talking to managers and then the fit's not quite right, and often that's from the manager. So they want to be, the manager wants to be reassured that they'll have the opportunity to do it the way that they want to do it, because they're being hired because of who they are and the way that they want to do it. So if a club's not going to allow them to do that, then and I know from speaking to David Artell previously, he has had some opportunities that he's turned down because it's not the right fit for him. I think I think that if he'd done what he did with Crewe and they were still in League One, and maybe he was still in the job, I think he would be a contender. But I think the fact you know, it's I don't know. But he said some really good stuff when we spoke to him on the podcast. He talked about, you know, he feels he's someone who can get the best out of people. You know, he oversaw the rebuild of Crewe when he came in, his first job in management, got them promoted. So I could see somebody like him the job, but I don't know. I get the sense that Reading are looking at someone who's had, you know, experience. If they're going to appoint someone who's been a manager in this country, they've kind of got to have had experience of League One and above, possibly, but I don't know. So should we make a start on our countdown of top 5? So do you want to go first, or shall I go first? Number 5.